Hey, what's going on, guys? It's your boy Armour. I'll be bringing you guys some Socom Confrontation from the PlayStation 3 side of the console side of it, and it's actually going to be a pretty good gameplay. I think everything kind of funneled into my perspective, especially in the perspective that I was hoping for. I mean, this map does have a couple of flaws. There's definitely quite a few glitches and stuff of the assortment, and I previously talked about, in the last video that I did for Socom, I talked about hacks and all that kind of stuff, and it got perceived very well. I was actually a little skeptical on that, considering that I know some people will, try to tell you otherwise. But at the same expense, I think we all combined operations on that, and I think we all kind of looked at it and was like, Socom's a really good game. It's just unfortunate that it becomes a hacked game in the long run. But anyway, guys, I guess that's the historical part of yesterday's video. But anyway, I'm going to go onward. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about Socom, and I'm going to continue onward through that standpoint. And I talked briefly yesterday about clans and the tactics that are commonly used between, teams and stuff like that to communicate to each other. And a lot of you guys sent me messages on YouTube, and you guys gave me information regarding that, and the perception was usually pretty accurate. Now, there are different systems, since on the PlayStation side of it, you cannot have active voice comms, and what I mean by that is, you can't be sitting in an Xbox Live party, for example, and you can't be communicating, giving out, call-outs even after death. It's a lot more written, and that's why people on the PlayStation side of it are extremely fast at typing. If you guys have ever, had a PlayStation buddy, or maybe you are yourself, maybe you don't look at it in the perception, but, you type very quickly. Every second matters, especially when you're trying to type, because, when you send a message, you want to keep it nice and brief, but at the same expense, you're trying to give enough information to the point where, the guy on your team will be like, oh, I know where that's at, I know where the river's at, he's halfway in it, he's under the bridge, he's hiding in some corner. You want to give key marks, you want to try to make it as descriptive as possible, but at the same expense, you are very limited to what you can type. I mean, you don't want to type it all in the middle paragraph, you want to put it in the subject, and you want to give the location of the previous opponent, and hopefully that guy will be able to eliminate him or set up a trap, and it'll work out in his, perception. But anyway, that's really that, but there is a technique to the PlayStation side of it. You can, however, make a chat, more like a chat room, I guess, where you have to manually type it. But that's a common thing that I see amongst players. All you have to do is simply just hit the, home button, and then you can start typing your message. And that's something that's widely used. I used to use it back in the day, and to be honest with you guys, it was a really effective manner. It was a very effective for getting the information out there, but at the same expense, not having to search through 50 people on your, friends list, or your recent players if he wasn't a friend of yours, and trying to do that, and all the communication department and all that stuff. Now, however, some of you guys might jump or, question the opinion of the online service, considering that the chat is not all, written. You can, however, speak, and the speak button on the PlayStation side of it, if I am correct, I want to say it's right trigger, or R2, I guess that's the right button that the PlayStation side of it uses. I could be wrong on that, so don't hold me exactly 100% to that, because it has been a sufficient amount of time, but I do want to say it's R2, and that special, formation of the controller. Now, when you talk, you have a brief amount of time that you can talk. You can't just sit there and hold the button and be that little asshole that everybody hates. And that's usually a pretty good thing, because it seems like the people that do hold the button are usually just little kids. I guess that's the nicest way to say it. I mean, I don't want to, go out there and be completely rude, but, the younger generation tends to hold it and sing in the microphone and do, just barbaric things that, the mature audience doesn't exactly agree with. Now, granted, when I played Socom, I think I was about 16 when I first picked it up, 15, 16, somewhere in that ballpark, and to be honest, guys, I wasn't holding the button down, but I would definitely mess around. I would definitely, play with it and have my fair share of it. So I'm not trying to come across like, oh yeah, it's just the younger generation, or, like the little kids, and I'm talking really little. It's not always that way, but it just seems to kind of funnel into that array, because you don't usually have the mature audience sitting there singing, whatever song that was nice and awesome, 4 years ago into the microphone. Now, however, there are different techniques that you can use. You don't actually have to hold the button down in order to speak. The functionality of Socom has always been so much ahead of the competition in tactics that it beats a lot of games even nowadays. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a fan of it. I'm not saying that in any regard. I'm saying it technologically and tactically, it beats a lot of games. Like, there's no game that will come close to as much information, as much detail was placed into the Socom series. It's always been above the competition, especially in that now graphically, I think it's really good. but that's just depending on how you want to look at it. Of course, not everybody's a third-person player. Not everybody enjoys that kind of stuff, and that's perfectly fine. Some people like vehicles. That's why Battlefield's a good competition. You know, you have Call of Duty for the arcade side of it. The action's always there. It's always literally 2-3 seconds away from you. And, you know, the deaths do come in a little bit more of a BS manner, but that's part of the game. SOCOM has always been something where it's like they spawn in the same spot every round, and there is a total of 4 to 8 rounds depending on what you're playing and stuff of that equivalency. Some competitive battles will go higher, but more or less it's on the same page of that. Now, granted, you can get into the unranked side of it where it just gets into this really crazy mindfuck of just spawning over and over again into spawn traps and stuff of that assortment, but that's, you know, neither here nor there. But anyway, back onto the main subject of what I was trying to get at. But, you know, when I talk about tactics, I talk about all this stuff, I want you guys to really, you know, understand that, you know, I'm not saying this game is the best game on the market. It's not. It's just not how it is anymore. SOCOM is a really good series, but there's no series in the world that's flawless. I mean, even single-player games are not flawless, and Socom Confrontation was one game that did not have a single player. It was basically always online. It was basically the first game I had ever played where if you didn't have an internet connection, you couldn't play the game because you always had to accept a user agreement thing, and there was no campaign. It was just not what they did. Now, I don't know. I don't know if I like that or hate that. I mean, I really don't care. I don't buy games for single player unless they are a single player only series. Like Assassin's Creed comes to mind, Grand Theft Auto, stuff like that. Those games are only single player. Now, I am aware that, you know, Grand Theft Auto and Assassin's Creed do have multiplayer, but nobody buys Assassin's Creed for multiplayer. Like, if you do, you're buying it for the wrong reason. And that's the whole point. I mean, you buy the game for the storyline. Now, you buy games like SOCOM, Call of Duty, Battlefield, list goes on. There's thousands of titles we could list that are, you know, the highest markings of a multiplayer experience. And that's what this game just happened to be. But in the same expense, you know, there was definitely its fair share of issues. I did talk about hacks, cheats, all that stuff. That stuff was in every game you'll ever play in your life, and I presume it'll probably be in every game probably ever released. But just depending on how bad it gets, it's usually dependent on the company. But, you know, there were glitches in this game. I remember a lot of them, and they were interesting. I remember selected weapons and stuff like that that became very overpowered and stuff of that array, but that's with every title, so there's really no game that, you know, is perfect. No matter how much you love a game, you know, people will jump to Call of Duty and be like, oh, COD 4 was really balanced. No, it really wasn't. You know, Battlefield series, there are weapons that are definitely super unbalanced. You have, like, Team Fortress and stuff like that. You know, there are just different setups, and those are examples, guys. I know some of you guys will agree, but more or less on the same basis. I just really wanted to talk to you guys about SOCOM. I want to give you information regarding it because I do realize that not a huge audience still plays SOCOM, but there are still people that do play it, and I see it all the time. Now, I want to briefly touch up here before the gameplay kind of comes to a close or is on the horizon of it. I did yesterday talk about the number of players that play SOCOM, but I didn't exactly speculate how many are commonly on during the rest of the day. And I do apologize about that. I did tell you guys when I was on about 4 a.m. in the morning, there was about 600 players. It was, you know, dropping a little below, a little sometimes higher, just depending. I was on for about a couple of hours because, you know, I wanted to get some gameplay of it. But, and the, you know, sector of how that functions out throughout the rest of the day, I've definitely seen my fair share of servers that will hit 2,000-3,000 players. Now, is that consistent every single day? No, it's not always consistent, but it's a little bit more consistent than other titles I guess we could name. You know, we could definitely go through and look at titles that no longer even have the online service and stuff of that, you know, formation, but on the basis of, you know, how many players will play on a common day, somewhere around 1,000 probably, 1,000, 2,000. That's usually on, or that's usually how many players are on at, you know, majority of the time in a normal setting. You know, the best time to definitely hit on the online service is usually, you know, after school hours, because that's when, you know, people that, you know, are kids, they want to jump on, they'll be out of school. That maybe if you're an older player, that's probably not something that you're too interested in listening to squeakers, but, you know, I'm just saying for player count, that's usually a good time to get on. You know, if you are an adult, definitely you want to hit the nighttime hours or a little bit more towards the afternoon, because you'll definitely find players. But anyway, guys, the gameplay's coming to an end. I really wanted to briefly touch up on that, give you guys information regarding that, and I look forward to posting more SOCOM. Definitely don't forget to give the video a beautiful thumbs up, and I'll see you guys in the next video, and this is NMO, and I'll be signing off. Peace.